Good evening, I'm Amirul Aiman. Here are tonight's top stories. Russia says talks between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump's envoys produced no breakthrough. And the United States halts immigration applications from 19 non-European countries. All that and more coming up on AWANI International. Russia and the United States have failed to agree on a possible peace deal for Ukraine after 5 hours of talks in Moscow between President Vladimir Putin and envoys sent by US President Donald Trump. Putin's foreign policy advisor, Yuri Ushakov, described the talks as constructive, but no middle ground was found, and that substantial work still lies ahead. He confirmed that Putin rejected several US proposals, saying some ideas might be workable with further study, while others remain impossible for Moscow to accept. Ushakov added that there are no plans for a direct meeting between Putin and Trump for now, though messages have been exchanged between the two leaders. The discussions at the Kremlin, attended by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, covered a wide range of issues, including territorial questions. That includes Russia's claim to the entire Donbas region, large parts of which remain under Ukrainian control and are internationally recognized as Ukrainian territory. Speaking in Washington, Trump said his representatives are trying to resolve an extremely complex conflict marked by heavy casualties. He has repeatedly said ending Europe's deadliest conflict since the Second World War is a difficult objective and has criticized both Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky for slowing progress towards a settlement. President Vladimir Putin has issued a stark warning saying Russia is ready for a military confrontation if one breaks out, and that any European move towards war would be met with overwhelming force. He also accused European governments of undermining US President Donald Trump's effort to reach a settlement in Ukraine, claiming they have put forward proposals they know Moscow cannot accept. Putin was responding to remarks by Hungary's foreign minister, who suggested Europe was preparing for war. He insisted Russia does not seek a confrontation, but said if Europe chooses to start one, the response would be so decisive that no European representatives would be left to negotiate. He also described Russia's military actions in Ukraine as limited and surgical, saying they should not be compared with a direct conflict against Europe. Nearly 4 years into the Ukraine war, Russia has yet to secure a decisive victory, while Ukraine continues to receive military and financial support from Europe and the US. Putin launched the full-scale invasion in February 2022, sending tens of thousands of troops into Ukraine and setting off the most serious standoff between Russia and the West since the Cold War. The Trump administration is pausing all immigration applications from 19 non-European countries already under travel bans. This includes requests for green cards and US citizenship. Officials say that the suspension is driven by national security and public safety concerns and is part of a wider immigration challenge changes following the shooting of 2 National Guard troops.
The policy also applies to countries already under partial travel restrictions since June, including Afghanistan and Somalia. The changes were outlined in a government memo which cited last week's attack on National Guard members in Washington, where one guard was killed and another critically injured. Officials identified the perpetrator as an Afghan national. Countries already facing severe limits since June include Afghanistan, Myanmar, Chad, Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen, all under near total entry suspensions with only narrow exceptions. Additional nations with partial restrictions are Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela. The new policy freezes all pending applications and requires applicants from these countries to undergo a full re-review, which may include interviews or repeat interviews.
That's the headline for tonight. More news coming up shortly after the break.
Belum tukar box lagi ke? Sebab nanti dah tak boleh nak stream on demand. Tak ada kontrak. Pasang pun percuma. Boleh menang barangan perkakas rumah dan pelbagai hadiah menarik.
Astro Ultra Box ni sangat senang digunakan sebab walaupun hujan, saya dapat menonton dengan tanpa gangguan. Saya suka stream Disney Plus dengan cucu-cucu saya.
Dengan box baru, boleh stream pelbagai aplikasi yang dah termasuk dalam pakej anda. Tunggu apa lagi? Nak menang? Tukar sekarang.
Welcome back. The European Union has agreed on a deal to phase out Russian gas imports by 2027, embedding into law the end of the bloc's reliance on its former top energy supplier. Under the agreement, the EU will introduce a legally binding, gradual ban on both liquefied natural gas and pipeline gas from Russia. The ban will be implemented in stages, with full prohibition set for late 2026 and third quarter of 2027. The measure was first proposed by the European Commission in June to address energy security risk following Russia's invasion of Ukraine and its curb on gas supplies to the bloc. Russia supplied 12% of the EU's gas in October, down sharply from 45% before the 2022 invasion, though several member states continue to receive Russian gas. US President Donald Trump has warned that any country he believes is sending illegal drugs to the United States could face military strikes. Speaking at a White House Q&A, Trump said a new phase of attacks on alleged drug traffickers will target sites on land and anybody involved in the illicit trade.
If they come in through a certain country or any country, or if we think they're building mills for whether it's fentanyl or cocaine. I hear Colombia, the country of Colombia, is making cocaine. They have cocaine manufacturing plants, okay? And then they sell us their cocaine. We appreciate that very much. But yeah, anybody that's doing that and selling it into our country is subject to attack.
So not necessarily just Venezuela.
No, not just Venezuela. No. Venezuela's been very bad. Venezuela's been really bad in something else, probably worse than most, but a lot of other people do it too.
In recent weeks, Trump has authorized strikes on suspected drug trafficking vessels in the Caribbean and Pacific, resulting in more than 80 deaths. He has also increased the U.S. military presence in the Caribbean amid rising tensions with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Washington accuses Maduro of being heavily involved in supplying drugs that kill Americans, an allegation he denies. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung says he is hopeful of US President Donald Trump can persuade North Korea to resume dialogue. Describing Trump as a pragmatist and master negotiator, Lee says Pyongyang seems to take Washington more seriously than Seoul when it comes to protecting its regime. He added that South Korea will work to create an environment that allows for communication. Trump had expressed interest in meeting North Korean leader Kim Jong-un during his recent visit to South Korea, but the encounter did not happen due to timing issues. Trump and Kim held summits in 2018 and 2019 before negotiations broke down over Pyongyang's nuclear program. The two Koreas remain technically at war, with North Korea rejecting conciliatory gestures despite Lee's pledge to resume dialogue. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung says Seoul will not take sides in the escalating dispute between Japan and China over Taiwan, calling instead for the two countries to coexist. Speaking at a news conference in Seoul, Lee warned that Northeast Asia remains a highly dangerous region and said choosing sides will only worsen regional instability. Lee said the region must prioritize respect and cooperation, focusing on stability rather than taking sides. His remarks come as he seeks to repair long-strained ties with China after years of friction under his predecessor, Yoon Suk-yeol, who aligned more closely with the United States. Last month, Lee met Chinese President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the APEC summit in what Seoul called an opportunity to reset ties. The diplomatic spat between Japan and China began after Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi suggested Tokyo could intervene militarily if China invades Taiwan, prompting sharp backlash from Beijing and the warning for Chinese citizens to avoid traveling to Japan. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and US President Donald Trump have signaled that relations between their two countries are improving after months of economic and political tensions. In a 40-minute phone call, the leaders discussed reducing trade barriers and tackling organized crime.
Lula highlighted recent Brazilian police operations aimed at financially crippling criminal groups, including branches operating abroad. Brazil and the US have long had strong ties, but relations strained earlier this year after Trump returned to the White House. In February, Brazil's Attorney General charged former President Jair Bolsonaro, a known ally of Trump, with trying to overturn the 2022 election. Trump protested the trial and in July threatened to raise tariffs on Brazilian exports to 50%, which were imposed in August. Trump has since had cancelled 40% tariffs on several Brazilian food items, including cocoa and fruits. Lula said the removal of the tariff was very positive, but other products are still impacted by tariffs and need to be discussed.
US President Donald Trump says he does not want Somali immigrants in the US, claiming they rely too heavily on social welfare and contribute little. His remarks follow the administration's pause on all asylum decisions after the shooting of 2 National Guard soldiers in Washington.
Immigration authorities have reportedly been directed by the Trump administration to target undocumented Somali immigrants in Minnesota later this week. Minnesota officials condemned the plan, warning it could unfairly sweep up American citizens. Somalia is one of the world's poorest countries, with many migrants arriving in the U.S. during the 1990s Civil War. Minneapolis and St. Paul host the largest Somali community in the U.S.
Just days after Hong Kong's deadliest fire in decades, the city's government says legislative council elections will go ahead as scheduled on Sunday. A heavy police presence and low voter turnout are expected for the poll, the second since 2021 reforms allowed only pro-Beijing patriots to run.
The vote comes as the city shifts quickly from national mourning to a highly anticipated political exercise, seen by analysts and residents as a test for the government's legitimacy amid public anger over the fire and ongoing national security crackdowns. Hong Kong Chief Executive John Lee said holding the election would allow newly elected legislators to act quickly on post-disaster reconstruction and reforms. But the vote may be far from the minds of those who lost loved ones, with the death toll of the fire reaching 156 and public outrage remaining high over the government's response. Initial investigations suggest it spread rapidly due to non-fire retardant materials, including green netting and highly flammable foam panels used in renovations.
The search for the wreckage of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 will resume on 30th December, more than a decade after the aircraft vanished with 239 people on board. The Transport Ministry says marine robotics firm Ocean Infinity has confirmed it will restart seabed search operations for a total of 55 days.
The search started in March this year but was suspended after a few weeks due to bad weather. The new search will cover an area of approximately 15,000 square kilometers in the southern Indian Ocean. Ocean Infinity would conduct the mission on a no-fine, no-fee basis, meaning Malaysia pays nothing unless debris is found. If wreckage is located, the company is seeking $70 million, the same proposal it made in 2018. Flight MH370, a Boeing 777, disappeared in 2014 en route from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, triggering the largest search effort in aviation history. Malaysia, China, and Australia previously scoured 120,000 square kilometers of the southern Indian Ocean. Ocean Infinity's initial mission in 2018 covered a refined 25,000 square kilometer zone but concluded in June that year without success.
That concludes AWANI International for tonight. Stay with us as we track the strategies and power shifts shaping the new global order. For more updates, visit international.astroawani.com and follow us on social media. I'm Amirul Aiman. Thank you for watching. Good night.